Honey, I've been thinking this is one of the phrases that instantly gets a husband's attention. It's right next to honey. We need to talk, which means I'm mad at you, or I did something you won't like, or does this dress look good on me, which is always an attempt to either get you to tell her she's the most gorgeous woman you know, or to see if you'll actually tell her what you think. Sorry, guys. But there's no way you're getting out of this trap either. Get over it and hope, because you have a 50/50th chance at fame, or go with the sneaky thing and say, oh honey, this looks as good as it always does. There's also the if you love me sentence, which means she knows you'll object, but she wants you to do it anyway. The I recently did this for you. So which means she knows she's asking for a lot, but wants to make it seem less by mentioning something she did in a preemptive deal. Or my personal favorite, the always irresistible I'll make it worth your while, which is always accompanied by a breast or leg showing, or if it's really important, groping and kissing with language, of course. Most of it is easy to deal with. I have a hard time saying, honey, I've been thinking I could probably diffuse the problem behind that statement by saying what first occurred to me. Congratulations, honey, there's a first time for everything. However, I don't like sleeping on the couch, so I'm very good at keeping my mouth shut. I had to say it this time. I had to forbid what she was going to say because her big idea pretty much ruined my interest in sleeping with her anyway. Yeah, I would have liked the couch tonight. Our lives have changed so much. The kids are on their own. We're financially secure. We have no worries, but still we are locked into a routine that we have created over the last 25 years. Get up, go to work, come home, make dinner, kiss goodnight, go to bed, and repeat all of this from day to day. I want something exciting in my world. I've thought about it. I've considered our daily routine. I've suggested traveling more on the weekends. Day trips to nearby attractions can be exciting. I suggested adding the ballet, which she loves, and our local baseball team, which I love, to our subscription. I suggested buying a boat or motorcycle, tennis lessons, dance lessons, joining a bowling league, taking garden tours, or a book swap. These are all things we either dreamed about or had fun doing during our time together. So I thought I could revive some interests to revitalize the life my lovely lady had been depressed about. My suggestions failed. Each one crashed and burned until I suggested that instead of kissing every night and having sex once every week or two, we have sex every night and kiss goodnight every week or two. I joked and let her know that I actually meant something like that. Imagine my surprise, honey. We're 48 years old. We have sex once every week or two. I know you'd like more, but it's just so boring. Imagine my surprise. You've been the only man I've ever loved and will always love, so I don't want you to be angry. I want you to listen to me. This couldn't have been good. Diana never beat around the bush. She always got straight to the point. Something big was really brewing in her pretty little head. You're also the only man I've ever made love to, and that makes me curious. I catch myself wondering what's out there. You've always made me happy in bed. But Denise says this is it. Denise, I might have known she was crazy. She was fun, but she was crazy. She was ready for anything that involved either nudity or sex. It was only 6 months into her third marriage, and she was addicted to finding loser candidate #4. She had made good money from each divorce, and she had a beautiful little mansion on 5 acres next to a country club and a bank account almost as big. She had 3 children, one by each husband, and they all received child support from their wealthy fathers. Denise had been to every nude beach in the country and many overseas. She knew the coolest cruises, the hottest clubs, the sexiest adventures. She was the kind of girl who could wear 6-in stilettos to a church picnic, and no one would even blink an eye. She exuded lust, and she was my wife's best friend, and I'm doing a very wrong thing if I don't try other guys before I'm too old. So I say we start meeting Denise on Friday nights and explore her world. It's the perfect time before I start looking old and saggy, but since the kids are gone, no one will get hurt. No one is going to get hurt. My stomach was ready to blow lunch all over the living room. Yeah, no one's going to get hurt. What about me? Oh, honey, Denise said you might be jealous, but remember, I love only you and always will, but you had experience with other girls before we met. So, you know what this area is like. I only know you don't. I deserve to try some other flavor, Diane. What happens if you like one of these flavors so much that you can't give it up? What if you fall in love with someone else? What would happen to me? I'll lose everything if you do, and so will you. We have the perfect life, and we both be retired in a couple of years. We can travel, we can explore, and we can do it together. We are on the cusp of our golden years when we can rekindle those strong feelings we had when we were young before our children came along and put us into parenting mode. What's in it for me? You know that even in a no-fail state, a man will be raped in a divorce if I even think about it. No, you don't understand. I never want to divorce you. I want to keep you, honey. I want those golden years to be amazing, too. And even though Denise says I could really do well financially with a couple divorces, I can't imagine not spending my old age with you. I knew you'd come to this point because you're always thinking about everything, and this would be the first argument you'd make. So I asked Bobby to write a contract for us that clearly spells out what happens if we divorce. Now, remember, I don't want that at all. It's just to put your mind at ease. I read the contract. Bobby was good funny. She's my partner. We run a solid little two-person firm that provides our clients with excellent general legal assistance, not specializing in anything but practicing everything. Bobby took good care of me in this contract. The property division left my wife the house and contents, but gave me our winter condo, beach house, and my fishing cabin. It was financially good, so no complaints. Diane made a good salary and always wanted to keep her own money. We would have our own bank and investment accounts, and each of us would have our own pensions, so it would all remain swam queek to each his own. I paid off the mortgage 2 years ago, so spousal maintenance was not required, and the kids had college funds that would easily help them finish college and pay for a good chunk of grad school if they wanted to enroll. It was actually very neat and clean, and I wouldn't have been raped. Bobby deserved a thank you lunch. However, there would be a lot of questions about why she couldn't have warned me. Sure, there was client confidentiality, but we were partners. Wasn't there a conflict of interest? I reasoned that there was, but Bobby was also protecting my interests in this case, so I let her off the hook. Maybe even turn this lunch into dinner. Damn, Bobby and I were amazing partners at work, but we spent every careless moment flirting like teenage idiots. Wait a minute, that's it, what the hell? So what about me? I had to ask myself that. Question Bob's flirting with me, customers flirt with me, neighbors flirt with me, women at the country club. Flirt with me, hell, her best friend Denise is openly proposing to me in front of Diane. Okay, wifey wants to play with fresh meat. Let her, she wants to see what's in there, all right. She wants to compare me to other guys, all right. I'm not sure she realized what she was doing, throwing me into such a rich environment. I'm not sure she realized that Bobby's contract was written in such a way that the door was open for me to come out hunting too. I signed each copy right under her name and smiled like a cat getting the cream. Without saying a word, I handed her a copy and slipped mine into the filing cabinet, which I locked securely. Okay, baby, you're a free woman. From now on, you can play as you please. I only ask 2 things. No playing in our bedroom. We need to keep the marital bed just for you and me and no sloppy seconds. I want a full 48 hours between your last, __, and our next one, fair enough. Ooh, Teddy, I love it when you talk dirty, but remember, we're not banging, we're making love. No, Diana, making love is for 2 people who love each other and only each other. If you start making love, it will be with someone else, and that will be the end of us. As long as our relationship is open, we'll __. No, baby, you got it wrong. Part of the whole cuckold culture is a love affair, where a woman comes home and makes love to her submissive husband, and careless seconds are a big part of that. You have to accept my extramarital affairs to show me that you love me enough to let me explore other men, knowing I'll come back to you cuckold culture. No, honey, it doesn't work that way. Read your contract carefully. There's nothing in there that describes our relationship as your cuckold marriage. A cuckold is a man whose wife has sex with other men while he remains faithful or enslaved at home. I'm sorry, honey, I can't take it. In fact, I almost spit out my lunch when you first suggested it today. I have no interest in sharing you while I watch what was described in your contract was an open marriage we are both free to, __, as much as we want, and there were no rules or guidelines in our agreement, so yes, we are both unrestricted free agents. She picked up her contract and reread it carefully when she realized what she had done. Her shoulders slumped. I knew the seeds of curiosity had already taken root in her mind. I also knew that she was considering giving up on the idea since it wasn't exactly what she had planned, but her curiosity had grown to the point where it would need to be explored if she didn't do it that way. She would cheat on me sooner or later, but now there were new seeds. Now she had something to lose too. She too had to risk me not finding someone else to love. She too was risking everything. The doorbell rang. She slipped out of my office to answer it, and I followed her. Denise flew through the door, so he went for it. Diane looked in my direction. Denise followed her gaze and turned to face me. "So Denise, you take my wife away from me every Friday night?" Denise was confused. She probably expected me to walk away seething with anger and excitement about what I was going to do about Diane's proposal. She didn't say a word, just nodded. "It's going to cost you this time. Diane and Denise were surprised. If you get it on Fridays, I'll get you on Sundays." The ladies were stunned. I took Denise's head in my hands and pulled her to me to kiss her. I kissed her deeply and passionately. I didn't even look at Diane. I picked Denise up and carried her to my office, where I bent her over the soft armrest of my leather couch and her the way I had always dreamed of. We spent 2 hours straight in my office, devouring each other. Diane was right. A piece of fresh meat was inspiring and ignited a spark in me that hadn't seen the light of day since middle school. My came back to life again and again. Denise was pretty loud, and in less than an hour I heard Diane's car start and she pulled out. I didn't pull out not once when my wife returned. Denise had already showered and dressed, and I was grilling steaks. Neither Denise nor I could get Diane to talk at dinner. But the two of us enjoyed the endless stream of conversation, cute smiles and petting when it was time to leave. I kissed Denise very gently in that special way that always made Diane melt. "I'll see you next Sunday, honey." I said no. "I'll see you Friday when I picked up Diane up for her bachelorette party maybe, but you never know. I might have a date on Friday." She grinned and walked away. I grinned and went to watch Sunday's game. Diana was crying as she washed the dishes. She reached for me in bed. I pulled her against me. She wanted more, but I reminded her there had to be a 48-hour break to avoid sloppy seconds. She rolled over sobbing and obviously didn't fall asleep until just before morning. Unlike me, I slept like a baby. Monday, Diane went to work early as usual. She was a real estate agent, and the early birds got the fat worm. She left coffee and breakfast for me as usual. The newspaper was on the table as usual. It was business as usual. Except for the smile on my face, I had to hand it to my wife. A little extramarital action really got me thinking. I loved my wife. Denise was definitely peerless. That woman could RX like crazy, but nothing could compare to making love to the one. I may have switched roles with Diane, but I didn't like it. I wanted a woman with one man, me, as I always had. Bobby was grinning from ear to ear when I walked into the office. I told her the whole story and then invited her to dinner. She said she knew I would understand what she had left for me in the contract and giggled like a schoolgirl when I told her about Denise. She liked my sloppy second rule and the rule that our bed is sacred. She accepted the offer of dinner, but on the condition that we go to her place that same night we left work together. The dinner was great. The desserts were fantastic. The wines were delicious and Bobby was hot. We went back to her house and had sex for hours as we lay in bed. Breathing heavily, she told me that she had dreamed of being with me for years. "There were days when the bulge in your pants was so tempting, and I wanted you so badly, but your marriage was so important to you that I would never do anything about it." I know you love Diana, but when she came up with that rabbit idea, I couldn't resist. "If only for my one chance to get you Teddy. Tomorrow we'll be friends and partners again. But today I enjoyed being your woman. You know what? There are very few guys with a penis as big as yours. Even if Diane finds a well-endowed guy, the chances of her finding someone bigger than you are slim to none. And you know how to use it too, all that. And the kind of love you have for her, she'll come around, maybe Bobby, but if she waits too long, she might not have anyone to come back to baby. If that happens, I want to be first in line." I told Diane she was crazy doing it. "You were too good a catch to release you back into the wild. If she goes out of sight, you're mine." We kissed and I went home. Diane was asleep, so I showered and went to bed in the guest room. However, she was waiting for me at breakfast Tuesday, so Denise tells me that you are the best, she has ever had. I never knew your size was so much bigger than most guys on earth, until she told me that you were the only one I had, and I thought all the guys around me had friends like yours. That was the reason for all this. I told her that the sex got boring and there were nights when I just wanted you to finish quicker. I didn't feel like the work was worth the outcome today. She told me I was an idiot. Any woman who can get a guy with a penis like that, have him every chance she gets, just to make sure he stays with her forever. She also told me that if I did lose you, she intended to make you hash for, even if it meant losing her fortune to you in the divorce. Teddy, can we drop this case? That was really stupid. I just can't get over you making love to Denise and suddenly seeing what I asked you to do in a different light. At first, I wanted to jump at her offer, but I needed to make sure her promiscuous thoughts were gone. Besides, I was kind of on a roll after years of making love once every week or two. I had slept together twice in 2 days. Denise was a petite beauty with brown hair and a sexy dynamo who moved as if she could read her partner's mind. Bobby was a tall, voluptuous blonde whose _ tasted like candy and whose breasts tasted like heaven. Yes, Pandora's box was wide open and I wanted to play in it. Pandora was hot. Diana, there was a reason for all of this. You had a desire you couldn't contain. You had to act on it. That desire will come back and eventually you'll give in and cheat on me. I prefer things to be honest. So go get your samples, get it out of your head, and see how I do if you get through this month and find that you still miss me and want to go back to being just the two of us. We'll do it together. But put an end to it first. I don't want to hear about it later if you give up on the idea. And if we go back and I catch you cheating, I'll divorce you and use this contract against you as my big hammer. She reluctantly agreed. That night she reached for me again, but not yet. 48 hours after Denise had been screaming in the study, the news about Bobby stunned her. She cried again and couldn't sleep until my forbidden body hugged her. Maybe Thursday night, Wednesday. Today is golf day. I only work on Wednesday mornings, and when the weather is nice, I head out to play. However, today was not good weather. It was pouring rain all day. I saw Carla's SUV on the side of the road and parked. Next to it, she had a flat tire and was struggling with the jack. I jumped out to help her and had the tire changed in no time. We were both soaking wet, and she insisted that I follow her home for a cup of hot coffee and lunch. I agreed. She made shitty coffee, but what was remarkable was this woman's body. She took off her blazer as soon as the coffee maker did its thing, and my mouth must have dropped open. Her white blouse clung to her from the rain and was soaked through. I could clearly see the intricate lace pattern on the very sexy bra. I knew it wasn't much more than light, thin lace, as her dainty breasts were also so clearly visible. "Take it easy, boy. You're a married man." I laughed out loud. My stomach laughed well. I had a pretty flat stomach. I keep myself in shape, but if I'd been fat, I would have messed it up when I got myself under control. I explained my wife's stupid plan. Carla laughed. She had a flat stomach too, so her belly didn't jiggle, though it might have if she hadn't been in shape. Those tits, however, were heaving and bouncing with every breath she'd gotten AI've on herself too. Do you know how amazing a woman feels when her skin is moist? I was kind of all over her, but it was mutual. We ripped off our soaked clothes and rushed to her shower. We warmed up under the hot water, then we warmed up in her bed. We warmed up again in the shower, then I got dressed to go home. Carla hasn't had sex in months since she got divorced. Teddy, I hope you and Diane work things out. I mean, I really like you both. You're nice neighbors. But if something goes wrong, please think of me. I could really fall in love with a guy like you. That's both a request and a suggestion. I'm begging you as long as you're open with her, please. __. Me, every chance you get. I didn't say no. Diana was waiting for me. I was late for dinner, but it was okay. She hadn't cooked anything. We had a nice chat, and she admitted that she had won her first victory. However, she was very disappointed she was showing him the house. And he made her an offer they negotiated over the phone, and by the end of the day, the owner accepted his offer, and the deal was almost finalized. They completed most of the work in the business center at his hotel, and then celebrated with drinks and her treats. He invited her to continue drinking champagne in his suite. She told him she'd had enough champagne, she just wanted to __. I told you she likes the direct approach, apparently. So does he. As soon as they entered the room, they feverishly stripped each other. He pushed her onto the bed and ate her. __. He was clearly inexperienced and had no idea of her hot pots. She loved oral sex with me, and it seemed so wrong to her she tried to imagine sexual things to feel the passion with him, but nothing worked. Finally, he got tired and got up to __, her Teddy. He was so small, he was only about 7 and long and thin. I could hardly feel him. The sex was so awful when I got home. I was so mad at myself. I thought I finally had a stud, but I didn't even come close to finishing. He was so proud that he had lasted so long that he started saying nasty things about you. Have you ever been __, that long? How do you like that, buddy? Hubby can't touch you where I am, can he? He even continued after he was done. Finally, I told him to shut up about you. I told him that you were 10 in long and thick and that he didn't stand a chance against you. I told him that you even know I'm __. Tonight, so he didn't even win anything. He looked so sad. So I told him he was really nice and I enjoyed our time together and then wished him the best. In his move, I even suggested he take his wife out to dinner. Maybe we could switch places. You should have seen the way he stuttered. We laughed about it and it was the first good moment we shared. She knew I was with Carla. My car was parked there as she drove by her house, and since it was right across the street and 2 houses down, she saw me leave to go home. I want you to come back to me now. I have to wait until Friday for a chance to win you. It's really not fair. A husband comes home to his wife every day. For years, he takes care of her. He mows the lawn and acts as a garden slave. He holds her hand when her mother dies. She holds his hand when his father dies. They bring each other chicken soup when they are sick and share the responsibilities of raising their children. He is there for her every day. Suddenly, the wife says, "This is boring. You keep taking care of the daily nonsense, and I'm going to someone else for fun since you're too tired of the daily stuff to interest me." Diane, that's not fair. I still want you back. You haven't lost me. But one jerk is in a real pattern. Go scratch your itch, and you have no right to me anyway. It'll be 48 hours to Carla on Friday. But one of us is bound to get lucky Friday night. And I have a date with Denise on Sunday. Looks like only next Tuesday is your day, we'll see. She grinned. Thursday, I've been had by beautiful women 3 days out of the last 4. I had 3 women who told me that if my marriage didn't work out, they would wait. I had a wife who had come to her senses, but still not in a position to be believed or trusted as my one and only. I guess I needed a break. I was a little lucky, though. Just as we were about to close the office that evening, a woman walked in. Bobby had an appointment to pick up her car from the repair shop. So I agreed to take care of her potential client, Mary. Our office manager and Pargle by preference had left hours ago, which left me alone with a tall, dark-haired, olive-skinned beauty. To my delight, she had taken off her coat. She was wearing a tight-fitting, high-collar sweater dress cut high enough to allow me to see the lace tops of her stockings. The high heels complemented the look so well that it wasn't long before I looked into her deep, dark eyes. "I've come for advice on a domestic matter," she said in the sexiest, sultriest alto I'd ever heard. "My advice is to divorce him and run away with me." I replied nonchalantly. She continued to stare into my eyes until I saw them start to twinkle. She started giggling, and soon we were both laughing. I told her I was about to leave, but if she hadn't eaten yet, we could talk over dinner. She didn't say no. We discussed her case. She suspected her husband of cheating, but couldn't prove it. She was terribly upset about the situation and wanted to protect herself in case he suddenly left her. I gave her some advice about protecting her financial assets, closing joint lines of credit, withdrawing half of their joint savings, putting the money in her own account, and hiding some of her family heirlooms, such as jewelry, artwork, and silver where he couldn't get them. I told her how to monitor his actions by hiding GPS in his car, activating phone lookups on his iPad and phone, and even tracking his phone usage. I put her in touch with a detective agency in case she wanted to bug his house or their cars, or have him followed. I advised her to find a friend or relative to stay with in case things went bad, and suggested she start keeping a daily log of incidents that made her suspicious. "How do you feel about revenge sex?" saying this. She reached across the table and took my hand. With her other hand, she undid another button on her blouse, revealing even more of her ample cleavage. I grabbed the outstretched hand with both hands. I feel like it's a flattering offer and an especially tempting prospect, considering I'm currently having my own marital problems, but at this point, although you haven't officially hired me, you're my client. And being involved in your revenge sex is a conflict of interest. You're fired. I had to laugh at that. My groin reacted too, and I felt the familiar hardening flow of blood rush into my unyielding penis. Then I have nothing to lose, but before we go, I want you to be sure this is what you really want: revenge. Sex seems nice at first, but tomorrow morning it might make you feel guilty that you're just as bad as your husband, and if you find that you're wrong about his deception, there's no turning back. You will be held responsible for causing a rift in your marriage and potentially become the guilty party in the divorce suit he files. Is that what you want? Her heavy sigh answered my question. I studied her beautiful face as she contemplated her next move. "Can I please hire you back? I would be honored to do so, but if I do divorce him and your marriage doesn't improve, we'll every night for a month when it's over. I'll consider that promise a down payment." I walked out of the pub feeling pretty good. I was proud that I'd handled it fairly and coolly on the way home. I stopped by the store to buy another bottle of wine. Hey, I was going to spend the night at home. I might as well have a little drink. As I was paying, I was surprised by a familiar voice, so Denise told me that you and Diane have some kind of arrangement, and that she's never had anyone her the way you do. I turned around and saw Tina smiling at me. Tina was one of Denise and Diane's friends. She was just as wild as Denise, but she played much harder. She was the kind of girl who would drop her panties for anyone as long as they spoiled the hell out of her first. No, not just dinner and expensive dates. Jewelry had to be involved, or expensive shoes, furs, paintings. You could date Tina all year long, but those panties wouldn't come off before you took her shopping or offered her a box of pearls or diamonds set in something. I'm sure the dress she was wearing cost at least $1,000. Though it lacked fabric at both the hem and the necklines, her shoes were no doubt in the same price range, and there was no doubt that their heels were worth every penny since they lifted her ass, and Kat have so sexily diamond earrings, pearls around her neck, and a hat probably worth as much as my car completed the look. Yes, I had a boner again, and this time the only conflict of interest was whether she'd be more interested in the Ritz or the Hilton. Well, Tina, I think only she would know that for sure. I think she also told you about my wife's brilliant idea that our marriage should be open after all these years. Yes, Teddy, she did. So since you're kind of free to play, how about you play with me, honey? What I'm afraid of is your reputation. My reputation, baby. I'm no wilder than Denise. And you started with her. What's so special about me? Okay, Tina, you told me all about your habit last summer. You lead guys around until they're totally hooked on the idea of sleeping with you, and then you go to Tiffany's or Neiman Marcus for high-end shopping before they can close the deal. I just don't want to leave you a tribute like your dates usually do. So, if you want to find out if Denise's story was accurate, you'll follow me to the Hilton right now. When we get there, you'll give me your pearls and diamond earrings as tribute, and then I'll spend all night your brains out. She hesitated and grabbed her pearl necklace. It was really quite beautiful, and sat seductively on her lush, albeit surgically enlarged breasts. It's a one-time offer, Tina. I seem to be generating a lot of interest as an available single, and I don't plan to seek you out or consider you again if you reject me. Diane can terminate our agreement any day, so my freedom is severely limited, and I'm not going to waste a single night on this. She raised her pearl necklace above her head and held it out to me. It was truly beautiful, and the diamonds followed it. If you're as big and hot as Denise says, you can keep the shoes too. And if you get me interested in breakfast, you can keep my panties too. The Hilton was quite cozy. The breakfast was delicious. I could get used to Benedict's balls with a side of well. I checked out carrying Tina's shoes and her very luscious panties in my pocket. I got to work pretty late, but I didn't have any early appointments. There were a dozen messages on my phone from Diane. I wrote that everything was fine and I would see her this weekend. Bobby liked the story and was quick to point out that I now looked like a cat getting drunk on cream. Friday, I got home late. Diane had already left with Denise and Tina for their bachelorette party. Diane left me a note. She was very upset that I didn't come home last night and that I wasn't there to see her off. She felt that I was not at all supportive of her need for this project and that we needed to have a serious talk when she got home. Since I didn't have the courtesy to call her last night, I shouldn't expect her to call tonight. She was hoping that I liked being kept in the dark about my spouse's whereabouts, but the turnaround was fair game, and I needed to learn my lesson well. She certainly showed me now I could look forward to a night of hanging around the house, pacing the floor, worrying about the outcome of her date years of marriage, and my only woman kept me on my toes. Maybe once a week we would make love. It was perfect for me now. 5 different women in 5 nights. They all pounced on me, most of them offering to take Diana's place if this experiment led to a breakup. Now that I knew that variety really was the spice of life, there was no way in hell I was going to waste my Friday night pining for the one woman who rejected me last week. Ironically, the love of my life was now. The only woman who had rejected me sleeping with her now seemed like a distant memory. If I had my way, it had to become at least 48 hours more distant. I was going to leave. I was going to town. My kids had introduced me to alternative rock music, and there was a concert at Radio City featuring 3 great bands. I got a great seat and plopped my ass in the front row of the balcony in the aisle. I was quickly surrounded by a group of hot 20-some guys. Good, yes, they were adults, but for my age, they were kids to me. Sure, I got a few taunts about being out of place, but The chick who was teasing me about missing the Guy Lombardo concert by a couple decades had such a cute smile that I couldn't risk not smiling back. Sure enough, when the first band fired up the room, I got up singing along and dancing. Yes, I knew every word to every song all the bands would play that night. I had reached a new level of awesomeness, of course. Buying a few beers helped. And when they handed me a funny-looking cigarette, I didn't turn it down somehow. I managed to dance the night away in the aisles with all of them. And as we were leaving, Guy Lombardo's girlfriend grabbed my arm, declaring that I was going with them. I'm too old to party with you guys, I know, but we think you're good for at least one more round. I was definitely good for one more round, and I was good for another. The guys ended up pairing up with the girls, but there were fewer men than women in the herd that night. By the time round 4 came around, there were 3 of us. At least the ammo was getting progressively cheaper. After the first sip, Guy Lombardo's girlfriend looked up at me, grabbed my face and pulled me to her in a deep, juicy kiss. She had the taste of margaritas. Her friend claimed her as well. And when the first girl interrupted the kiss for a breath of air, the second girl continued where she left off. That set the time for the night. Their apartment was only a block away. I don't remember how we got there. I do remember clothes flying off bodies, and the bodies they flew off of were incredible. When my boxers fell off, the girls looked at each other, then raised their eyes to the sky and rushed toward me like animals at a watering hole after a month-long drought. I'd forgotten how soft and supple young skin can be. But it was enough to bring back my memories. I was a little concerned that the old reliable pole might be shaken. After all, it had been 10 in deep in 5 different women over the past 5 nights, and now faced with 2 insatiable, good-looking young creatures. But everything was working reliably. I was told I didn't recover as fast as the guys they were used to, but they could get used to my stamina. By the next morning, we were sore, sticky, smelly, and grinning. A shower solved the sticky and smelly parts. Time would cure that pain. The smiles will last a long time. As I left, I found Tina's gifts in my pockets. No, not the sais. I'd left them at home on the kitchen table for Diana to find and cry a little. The earrings looked great on Guy Lombardo's girlfriend, and the pearls looked great on her friend. They were delighted and amazed at the same time. Now I was a sexy Robin Hood, screwing the rich and giving to the young and needy. However, jewelry really is definitely a girl's best friend. They convinced me to spend Saturday walking through museums and Central Park and Saturday night at a blues bar in Brooklyn, followed by another night of brew and sex. I kissed them goodbye late Sunday morning and headed home to see, yeah, I bet you thought I'd say Diane, didn't you? No way, Sunday was Denise's day. I wasn't sure how I felt about Diane. At that moment, she was more than just a roommate. I still loved her. Of course, we had lived a lifetime together, raised children, had a great time, and helped each other through the hard times. But when it came to inserting tab A into slot B, as the instructions stated, my tab A had no interest in her slot B. In fact, slot C and D had very little appeal as well. I just wasn't inclined to consider her as a sexual partner. Maybe my wife's desire to experiment and open up our relationship led her right into the friend zone. When I got home, she was waiting for me in the living room. Obviously, all was not smooth sailing in paradise. Diane was very upset that I hadn't been home all day Saturday and had been seething with anger since she got home Friday night. You need to seriously explain everything. Hello to you, too. And how was your weekend? I got laid Friday night, thank you very much. And I finally found a man who knew how to treat a woman, if you ask me. I really wanted to share my feelings with you, but you weren't home. Who the hell are you playing with, girls? To very young, incredible... Well, that was pretty clear and actually pretty straightforward. Diana went off the rails, mumbling some nonsense about how it was going to go. I wasn't really listening, but she was on fire. There was something about the natural flow of the affair and how it was supposed to bring us closer together, talking about our experiences when it was over, and how I was supposed to be at home, thinking about her to create anticipation of our reunion, and our lovemaking would be so much stronger. And ladies, take a note from me, it doesn't take much. And unless you completely lose your male audience, in fact, the husband manual instructs us to start thinking about something completely independent of you with a second, and using caution and inserting a reasonable yes dear at least every 90 seconds to reinforce your resolve and get your point across long enough for us to complete the whole dream for real. Preferably involving someone with big breasts, long legs, and hair falling down as she lies naked next to us in bed. Wait, sorry, I must have gotten distracted. You see, even writing that in line isn't enough to put a die in the yes, dear position, but during this particular oratory and the thing that brought me back to the conversation was, you should have now, if there's any winged phrase mentioned in the husband's handbook that can counteract the end line, it's, you should have. Now, there are several acceptable responses to the you should have argument. The guy can ignore it and go back to his blissful dream world where a very young Audrey Hepburn lures him into her lair where she will finally open up her perfect body for his enjoyment. Not a bad choice, or he might choose a stronger response that challenges his wife's assertion that she had reason to expect him to follow her wishes, such as since when did I have to, which challenges her assertion of authority negating any agreement that would surrender control, or when did we decide, which reclaims his share of the decision-making partnership, the main trump card recommended to women by the Idiot's Guide to Control and ignoring your spouse. Progressively, more assertive responses range from, I never said, which is always guaranteed to result in a losing argument, because she has a videotape I never intended to, which can be a closing argument if uttered in an aggressive tone, but can also mean stopping sex for at least a month. Or you can just use that simple statement that men have relied on since Cro-Magnon times when dealing with a difficult wife. I'm so upset by your assertion that you have the right to determine what I should do, that I don't care what I have to do. And if you don't shut up right now, I'm going to feed your entire shoe collection to my dog that day. I decided to use the classic two-word version, screw you, Diane, was a little puzzled. I don't think she appreciated the encounter any better than my reaction to her decision to give me the horns. I wonder how she thought this attempt to get the upper hand in this situation by picking on or harassing me would work better than her announcement that she was terminating our exclusive relationship agreement from a week ago. I watched the wheels turn in my wife's head. I watched as she realized she had nothing to argue with. She wanted out so badly that she tried to negotiate a legal agreement to protect herself from losing everything in the divorce. She lost control exactly where she sought it, failing to regularize my access to sex and guarantee my status as a weak, reluctant cuckold, pining for her charms. Meanwhile, she discovered that the man she was tired of was full of qualities desired by other women. The last trump card, his access to sex, which should have become extremely valuable through her rationing, was suddenly available to him every day from a variety of sources. At the same time, her access to tender lovemaking sessions with him was no longer available to her, but was being tried to his great delight by girlfriends, neighbors, and strangers half her age. To make matters worse, all his new mistresses had managed to let her know how jealous they were that she had enjoyed a monopoly on a man like him all these years. She'd heard about his gentle touch, his handsome face, his strong hands, his patience in bed, his intuitive way of giving them what they needed, his stamina as a lover. They even marveled at his masculinity. Imagine a man his age every night this week. He had spent a vigorous night in bed with another hungry woman. The last 2 nights in a row he'd spent with 2 girls half his age. And yet here he was, ready for his Sunday date with her best friend. Can we change our minds? I'm listening. I was wrong. You think you're not going to let me off easy, are you? No way, it's kind of a big deal. She stopped to think. I knew she was on the right track. I knew she was ready to offer to go back to where we were before she decided we needed to talk. However, there was no way I was going to go back to where we were before. Heck, if it could happen once, with warning what could happen in the future. Without warning, I assume you're worried about our future after all. You didn't see this coming, and if we can burn this contract, I'll agree to a new one that says everything you want to say if you'll have me back as your only woman like we used to be. I sat back and pondered her words. At least I pretended to mull it over. Of course, I wanted her back as my only woman. That's all I ever wanted. I know I should have been hurt by what she did. I was hurt, I just wasn't hurting as much anymore. I mean, I had help from Denise Bobby Carla, my olive-skinned client Tina Guy Lombardo's girlfriend, and her dazzling friend now in diamonds. Yes, a week of nights with 7 different sexy women had put a lot of balm on my broken heart. But I planned to make Diana work her ass off a one demand in any position I liked, wherever I said, as long as it didn't involve public shaming or danger. She blinked. Oral sex wasn't her favorite, unless she wasn't getting it. Her head bowed, and Denise's very meek voice replied, I agree, your ass is open for play. It is available to me for anything I desire unless you are sick or experiencing some discomfort unrelated to sexual intercourse. She was a my ass is just an outlet type of girl. I wasn't interested in anal sex either, so that point would be a big deal to her. But she was true to her word. She was willing to agree to anything. Before I was done, she agreed to wear ultra-sexy costumes for Christmas, New Year's Day, Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, Halloween, Thanksgiving, and my birthday. I originally suggested Rosh Hashanah and Chinese New Year as well, but removed them from that table when she objected on the grounds that they were not holidays we had ever celebrated. After all, we were neither Jewish nor Chinese. She has agreed to sleep naked every Friday night, no matter how cold it is, if I provide an electric blanket in the winter, to wear a French-maid outfit to clean the house every Saturday morning while I share chores with her to serve me and my friends. Drinks and snacks, dressed in a little black dress with heels and lace stockings on Super Bowl Sunday, and the first game of the World Series, taking off one article of clothing every hour of any long car rides while I drove sunbathing topless on our back deck, to ensure no tan lines, keeping her entire body smooth and her hair loose except for her head. I didn't think she'd go for it, so it would have been a throwback like Rosh Hashanah, but she didn't mind, so hey, why not? She also agreed to wear a thong, always in my presence. Yes, I'll lay it all out on paper. However, the actual contract read differently. 15 minutes after she agreed to be my sex slave until we died, I placed this contract in her hands. We, the undersigned, hereby agree to one, to love each other completely and to be exclusive until death too, that the events of last week are hereby forgiven but never forgotten, as they are a warning of what we both stand to lose. 3, that in the future, if either party attempts to step outside the boundaries of our relationship as defined by our original marriage vows, and discussion with the other spouse fails to find a solution, they will either immediately withdraw all suggestions of their abusive behavior, or B, leave the marriage immediately, sacrificing all claims to wealth, property, and financial gain. My signature already adorned the document. Diane read it carefully, fully expecting it to be full of the legal traps that Bobby had laid in our existing agreement. Of course, there weren't any. She reread it again. I'm sure in disbelief that I hadn't claimed her promises of swallowing and anal sex every night, no traps, no sex slaves. In fact, it only demanded what we had always had except for the third clause, which required communication about anything that deviated from the norm, including involving others in our personal lives. It also included protections for keeping our original vows. So you don't want me to wear a thong and socks every day? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, and anal sex only if you ask me to. I laughed. So you're taking me back? Yes, but only you. No one else gets anywhere near our sex life. I'll make it right, Ted, only by going back to being my loving lady. No, baby, I'll be better. No, there's nothing to make up. Point 2. You're forgiven. I'll tell you anything you want to know about the women I've been with this week. Anything you ask, I'll answer after we sign. Just don't ask about anything you don't want to hear, because you'll definitely forgive me once you agree to. Point 2, for the record, I never want to know about your adventures. I don't even want to know who they are. You don't care. Oh yeah, I don't care. Although I'd probably kill them. So keep me out of jail and out of the hospital or morgue. I don't want to know if I know them. Warn them to be afraid and never let me know. Don't smirk. Don't gossip. Don't even flirt with them. Are you serious? You've got to be kidding me now. You're jealous all week. I've been hoping you'd react with a little jealousy. Okay, Ted, I was stupid to start this thing. You didn't even fight for me. Now you're telling me you're jealous, Diana. It's different now. Now I want to hold on to you. Whatever's going on in your head, it's over. You're mine now. Last week, I believed you wanted to be someone else's. I wasn't going to fight for someone who didn't want me. When Denise, I was going to replace you. I didn't want Denise. But I wanted to study every figure, size, and type of woman before settling down with a new wife. I tried 7 too, may have been candidates in your absence. But none compare to you now that you want to be with me from now until eternity. I will fight any battle for you. She signed right away. So Teddy, do you think you could show me what I've been missing first? You have to throw your old contract in the fireplace. Mine's already there, then burn it. She went upstairs and picked up her copy. God bless Bobby. She probably saved our marriage with that beautiful, clever document. She lit the papers on fire, and soon that chapter of our lives was reduced to ashes. Now, Ted, we can go upstairs and make love. I laughed. It wasn't the funny laugh or the sarcastic laugh I'd used so often this week. I actually chuckled at the irony of it. No, honey, we're still in a 48-hour cooling off period between them. I didn't finish it well, actually. I did finish something. She ripped off my clothes and flopped me on the floor. Nature took its course, and in another brilliant moment, I finished just a couple seconds after her now, every time she says honey. I've been thinking, I quickly reply, if it's not about getting into bed with me, keep it to yourself. I know this isn't an approved response from the husband's handbook, but it works for me. Roger had never felt so alone in his life. Yes, he celebrated Christmas with his family, but he was alone. His parents had each other. His 3 siblings had their spouses and children, but for the first time in 12 years, Roger was alone. He had divorced his wife of 11 years just 2 months earlier, and now during a season that was always about family, he was alone. God bless his mother, his 2 sisters, and his brother. They tried their best to make Roger feel loved and included. Everyone in the house knew except his father, emotionalism wasn't his thing. He tried to remain nonchalant, clapping Roger on the shoulder as his only show of emotion. Roger knew it was his best version of fatherly love. It was just as effective as what the rest of the family was trying to do. You really can be alone in a crowd, Roger thought to himself. The family opened many presents under the Christmas tree. Everyone ooh and add laughed and teased each other as only a family can do. Roger tried his best to pretend to enjoy it. He didn't want to spoil it for anyone, especially his 7 nieces and nephews. Christmas is especially for children. Uncle Roger wasn't going to be part of the fun. Roger couldn't help but think about the one gift that wasn't under the tree. A 125-carat gold diamond necklace. It wasn't under the tree because it wasn't going to be given. About a month after Christmas in January, he received a large sum of money for the necklace. It was for his then-wife Tracy, who was the love of his life. In January, it wasn't until February that he found out she had been cheating on him for 6 months, and 2 weeks later hit her with divorce papers. At that point, he thought about turning the necklace back in for a full refund, but he just couldn't even dare to look at it. Roger loved this woman with all his heart, with all his soul, and was absolutely certain that they were together for the long haul. He guessed that there really are none so blind as those who can't see. Roger had noticed that the couple's sex life had slowed down about 6 months before, but he told himself that was because he and Tracy had been married for 10 years, and that was normal. What he hadn't noticed until further reflection was the secretive way she read her messages and never parted with her phone. He trusted her completely and never ever thought she would betray his trust. Of course, even in his wildest dreams, Roger never expected someone outside of his family to pronounce his last name correctly, and when it happened, he just had to stop and talk to the person who had just done the impossible one. Thursday around lunchtime, a Tier 1 supplier dropped by unannounced, and Roger decided to impress him with a great lunch. Roger took him to the best barbecue place in town on the other side of town, about 35 minutes away. Roger had probably only eaten there 3 times in the last 11 years, but John Steiner deserved better when it came time to pay. Roger put his credit card on the bill, and when the waitress returned, she thanked him by name, right like many Polish names. The spelling of the name has nothing to do with the pronunciation, so when she pronounced Ziwak Rat as Zico, Roger nearly fell off his chair. He and John looked at each other in shock. "How do you know how to pronounce it?" he asked the waitress, who seemed to be of Asian descent. "You don't look Polish at all when you see that name 2 days in a row." "You immediately remember," she laughed. "Apparently, I was serving a couple of your relatives at lunch yesterday, and I just had to ask how to pronounce the name is Tracy Jeju Arat. A relative, I didn't hear her husband's name. Although the man is they were a pretty cute couple." John realized that the waitress was referring to Roger's wife, and Roger blushed like a stoplight but held back. "Yes, she's family." He said she and her handsome husband get a bit carried away sometimes. "Don't they? I'll put it this way, sometimes I felt like I was interrupting a couple of horny teenagers. I hope to look as good as this woman when I'm in my 30s. Tracy was actually 37, but with a tight body and an abundance of curves, along with flawless porcelain skin and long, dark brown hair, she could pass for late 20s. Roger guessed that the ging Mr. Schwa Krat was actually Joey Brilliant. A salesman with a lush mop of hair, Tracy had been working at the same insurance agency in administration since about the time she and R had gotten married. Joey Brilliant had shown up at the office about a year ago, and Roger had heard from him almost every night after work for about 6 months. And then Tracy had suddenly stopped talking about him as if he didn't exist at all. Perhaps another clue that Roger, Mr. Trusty, had missed John, and Roger drove to the office very quietly. Roger, wasting no time, hired a private investigator. Within 2 weeks, the investigator had obtained evidence including a videotape of the lovers having sex in Tracy and Roger's bed on Wednesday morning, an hour after Roger left for work. The investigator warned Roger that the video was crude, but Roger, of course, wasn't even remotely prepared for such disrespect that _______. Roger shouted into the computer screen as he watched the proceedings in the privacy of his office. After hours, Roger didn't hesitate to have his attorney draw up the divorce papers. A week later, Tracy was served at work after watching the video of his wife and lover performing in his marital bed. Roger had no problem embarrassing Tracy in front of her co-workers. Roger got home early in the evening. When Tracy drove the car into the garage, she practically ran into the house and started yelling at her husband, "What the ___ are you doing embarrassing me in front of my friends and co-workers and my boss, for God's sake?" she shrieked. Roger sat leaning back in his chair and sipped his Lisette Boy bourbon, the bottle resting on the table next to his chair. He calmly finished his sip and set the shot glass down. "Because I wanted you to feel a little of what I felt when I watched you and Joey Brilliant sleep in our marital bed. You ___ at least you could tell me our marriage was over. You didn't have to desecrate our marital bed, and for crying out loud, don't you think I at least deserve some sort of apology?" Roger filled his shot glass again, and Tracy stared at him. It had just occurred to her to wonder how long Roger had known, and how he knew at least be so kind as to tell me what I did wrong and how long it's been going on. He said, "Oh, and is this guy the only one you're sleeping with? Don't be so rude." Roger, Tracy snorted. "We've been having sex for about 6 months now, and Joey's the only one. It just happened. You didn't do anything wrong. It just happened." Tracy's eyes filled with tears. Why the ___? Is she crying? Roger thought to himself. She's the one who cheated, and I'm the one who got cheated. Tracy stared at her husband with her mouth open as he poured himself another drink and sipped it quietly. Somehow it never occurred to her that her husband would find out about her affair, and even if he did, how he would react. It suddenly occurred to her that she had been terribly cavalier in taking advantage of her husband's affection. Roger's family had been as devastated as he himself had been when they learned of Tracy's betrayal. After all, they had been married for 11 years and almost seemed like the perfect couple. The only thing missing from that perfect marriage was children, although the couple decided to have 2 children when they were first planning their lives. Tracy kept putting off starting a family until one day Roger asked her if she was breaking their agreement. Tracy tearfully admitted that she was, and no amount of arguing from Roger could make her change her mind. It was a tense few months for the couple until Roger finally told Tracy that he would let her do things her way. Mary Houston looked sadly at her husband last Christmas. With its warmth and cheer seemed so far away. She thought this Christmas, with the recent divorce of oldest daughter Tracy, seemed almost ghostly. Yes, the house was full of their second daughter's family of 6. But Tracy, without Roger, seemed to be walking around in a bad dream. Plus, Roger was always the soul of the party when families got together. Although he and Tracy had no children, he loved his 4 nieces and nephews and was always supportive for their part. Mary and George Houston simply adored their former son-in-law, and in Tracy's feeble attempts to explain why their marriage had broken up never seemed adequate enough. Roger told his relatives that the decision to divorce belonged to Tracy, and he would not discuss it any further. Tracy felt the tension of the whole family as they spent the few days before and after Christmas together. She thought that being with the family would help her overcome the malaise she felt inside, but it turned out that being around the family had the opposite effect. Everyone seemed to be waiting for a better explanation as to why she and Roger had divorced, and it seemed her sister's children blamed her specifically for Uncle Roger not being around. The Houstons hadn't invited Joey to family Christmas, and Tracy didn't fight for his participation in the event. She would miss his lean, muscular body next to her in bed at night. But she wouldn't have to deal with the awkwardness of him being an outsider, realizing that it had only been 2 months since the divorce was official. Joey hadn't been particularly resistant when Tracy told him she was going to her parents' house for the vacations without him. Tracy was stunned when she was served divorce papers at her place of employment one afternoon in late February. She had no idea that Roger knew about her affair. She had been so consumed with her personal life that she was terribly embarrassed when she was served, and she was pretty sure she caught Joey's smirk in the background. She drove home furious. But that anger was replaced by confusion when she ran into Roger. He was quiet and calm and seemed more interested in his bourbon than arguing with her. Besides, she knew she really didn't have any good answers to his questions. He seemed to know a lot about the case, including the fact that he and Joey had a date right in the bedroom when Roger mentioned that she even thought it sounded tasteless. She told Roger the truth, that she didn't want it to happen. Virtually every woman in the office swooned when Joey joined the staff. His looks and charm quickly won over most of them. Tracy noted that the young man was very skilled at flirting and seemed to be very good at the seduction game. She didn't seem too bothered when Joey started chatting her up, assuming that she was immune to Joey's advances since she was completely in love with her husband. A casual lunch turned into a casual dinner. As Tracy told her husband several times that she had to work late, she admitted to herself that she enjoyed Joey's company, and the man was certainly handsome at the fifth dinner. The couple ended up in a hotel room, and Tracy hesitated for only a minute before she found herself under Joey. Tracy knew this wouldn't be the only time for the two of them. Tracy was somewhat surprised that she wasn't overwhelmed with guilt. As the two of them washed and dressed physically, she felt great and wasn't too worried about her husband. Completely satisfied with her young stud, Tracy refused to have sex with Roger. Joey's youthful enthusiasm, his overall strength and sexual stamina, combined with the illicit nature of what they were doing, kept Tracy hot and ready to go as long as the young man wanted. Then the two of them cuddled together, talking and laughing. It may not have been intentional, but the longer they were together, the closer Tracy became to Joey, because Roger always trusted Tracy and gave her space. She didn't feel pressured in her relationship with Joey. The two were never publicly frank about their relationship and were always careful with their dating, except when they occasionally used Tracy's marital bed at Joey's request. The young man found it exceptionally arousing to engage with Tracy in her marital bed, and being assured that they would not be caught. Tracy had to admit that she found it arousing as well. Once Tracy got used to being serviced, she and Joey began to spend more time together. And not just sexually. She found peace and security in his strong arms. Just as she had once found in Roger's arms, she was surprised at how easy it turned out to be to forget her husband. Joey Brilliant missed Tracy. When she went to her parents' house for Christmas, the couple began their romance more than a year ago, and grew closer when Tracy's husband, Roger, filed for divorce in February. The divorce became official in October, and Joey and Tracy considered moving in together. They talked about having Joey accompany Tracy to her parents' house, but Tracy made the decision to go to her parents' house alone after her mother told her that her lover wasn't invited or welcome. That was actually fine with Joey because he wanted to spend some time partying with his friends, and that probably wouldn't happen with Tracy around, to be honest with him. Joey hadn't planned on being with Tracy for that long, but she was a beautiful woman and a damn good ... When he'd first pursued her at work, he'd known she was married, but it had never bothered him before. He'd seduced a few married women. He just hadn't planned anything long-term. That plan changed when Tracy's apparently clueless husband stopped being clueless after about 6 months and filed for divorce. Joey couldn't believe that Roger had basically just abandoned his wife without putting up a fight. Joe had no way of knowing whether Roger was stupid or cowardly, and discussing the matter with Tracy didn't bring him any closer to an answer. The strippers were in full swing, and on the night before Christmas Eve, the party was good. Joey had left his friends around 1 o'clock in the morning, accompanied by a pretty blonde who had been drinking with Joey and his friends for hours. That damn guy is so good-looking that women just can't get away from him, one of Joe's friends said to the other man. The men grinned. It had been almost 5 years since Roger had last seen Mary Huon. He had always liked Mary and George. They had been very kind to him over the years and had nothing to do with what their daughter had done. Roger still sent birthday and Christmas cards. When Roger walked into the Italian restaurant, Mary was already seated at a table. Although she and George lived an hour south, She had asked Roger to meet her at one of his favorite restaurants near the apartment he had moved into after the divorce. At the thought of divorce, Mary's eyes moistened. Roger was a great guy, and even now she couldn't understand what Tracy had done when Roger came to the table they hugged. "It's been too long, Roger," Mary said. "George and I and the rest of the family have missed you. We love you, Roger, and nothing Tracy has done will change that. And I love all of you guys." Roger replied, "I'm sorry to be so distant from you guys. We understand, son, it's okay, but I have a selfish reason for wanting to see you remember Tracy's cousin Bunny, the youngest of her wedding friends who went into the Air Force shortly after the wedding. Well, she went back to civilian life and just got a job with an aerospace firm in your town. I was hoping you could show her around the city, introduce her to the right people, and just point her in the right direction. Honestly, I'm not asking for anything more than that." Roger smiled crookedly at his former mother-in-law. She feigned surprise. "It was a request for either you or my daughter, and right now neither George nor I take much pleasure in seeing Tracy lead her own life, let alone help someone start a new one." Roger nodded in agreement. Enough said. He thought a few days later Roger called Bunny and invited her to lunch at the same restaurant where he had met Mary. He really didn't know what to look for, because the last time he'd seen Bunny, she was a thin, blonde-haired, freckled 19-year-old girl getting ready to go into the Air Force. Now she was 36 years old. The only hint Mary had given him was that Bunny no longer had freckles and her hair had darkened. Roger waited attentively as the waiters escorted the three lone brown-haired women to other tables. The fourth brown-haired woman turned out to be Bunny. Roger was more than surprised. She was well-built from top to bottom. Roger figured her time in the service had certainly enriched the woman physically, and her sparkling blue eyes would make her a favorite of single men all over town. Roger decided that the dinner had gone well. Bunny had turned out to be very intelligent and had more than held up her end of the conversation. Roger reminded himself to call Mary and thank her for putting him in touch with Bunny. Roger enjoyed Bunny's company so much that he invited her over for a second lunch, and then dinner and a concert. He definitely had Mary to thank. Tracy sat at a restaurant table waiting for her bow. In her 43 years, she was still a beautiful woman with a tight, lush body thanks to regular visits to the gym. Her date was a 50-year-old accountant. She was anticipating a pleasant, albeit unassuming evening. Now she was happily embracing the pleasurable since her divorce. Tracy thought her relationship with Joey was heading in a positive direction, perhaps toward marriage. The sex was amazing, and her emotional feelings for Joey continued to grow. However, about a year after the divorce, Tracy noticed that both the sex and emotional attachment to Joey had leveled off. She often wondered if the sexual decline was due to the fact that sex was no longer illegal. As for the emotional decline, Tracy often thought back to her marriage to Roger. She missed the little things she'd shared with Roger, the light touches, the sweet nothings he'd whispered to her after sex. And over breakfast, she and Joey often shared time living in each other's apartments, but this sense of intimacy just never came up. Tracy began to suspect that Joey was seeing other girls. The couple hadn't discussed being exclusive, but Tracy assumed it would be after the divorce when a burning pain in her intimate area is confirmed in STD. Tracy realized that her suspicions were confirmed. "You goddamn bastard," Tracy screamed at Joey when she got the confirmation. "I gave up my marriage to a good man for you." Joey couldn't find anything to object. He only smirked across the table. A light went on over Tracy's head 2 years later, when her STD had long since been cured. Tracy stood up to greet her bow and chastely kissed Fred Myers on the cheek. As she leaned in for the kiss, she noticed that Fred had Frederick Malle aftershave, the same expensive aftershave that Roger always used. She hadn't thought of Roger in half a day. She grinned to herself. Joey certainly liked having Roger's wife. She was prettier than most of the wives of other men he'd had, and she was a great lover. So many women just lay around like dead fish. Tracy wasn't one of them. She seemed to enjoy illicit sex as well. Joey noticed that the arousal began to diminish when Roger filed for divorce from Tracy, but her emotional dependence on him seemed to grow. At first, Joey enjoyed the intimacy, but then he began to see it as a great burden. After he had been exclusive with Tracy for about 2 years, the itch for other women began to rear its head. He would sneak out with other women from time to time, but since he preferred sex without saddles, he soon caught syphilis. He had no sooner told Tracy than she herself found out that he had passed his problem on to her. She was unhappy about getting the STD and what the disease meant for the couple's relationship. Joey didn't lose a minute of sleep over his breakup with Tracy. It was a huge party to celebrate Roger and Bunny's 25th wedding anniversary. Roger surprised his wife by renting a party room at their favorite restaurant and inviting friends and family, including the couple's 23-year-old son Daryl and 21-year-old daughter Abigail. No one was surprised by his former mother-in-law's role 5 years after Roger divorced. Tracy Mary asked him to help out his younger cousin Tracy, who was coming back to town after serving in the Air Force. Lunch turned into a relationship. Roger learned that Bunny was divorced. "You set me up, Mom," Roger said with a wry grin when he met Mary after learning about Bunny. It was a really good plan. Mom Mary smiled broadly and grinned. Roger looked embarrassed. "It wasn't a plan, Roger. I swear," Mary said quietly. "I was only asking you for a favor. There was no way I expected it to last. I knew you'd hardly been seeing each other since the divorce, but I never thought. I can't tell you how happy George and I are. You know, we always thought highly of you and love Bunny to death. We know you'll do right by this girl, just like you always did right by Tracy when you were married." "Whoa, Mom, you're in a bit of a hurry now, aren't you?" "I don't think so," Roger Mary replied. "You two look great together. Sheck got your heart, hasn't she?" "You know me well, Mother. Now suppose it does happen. Who do I call, Mom, you, or your sister Grace? What about both of us? Grace may deserve the title, but I'd be incredibly hurt if you called me anything else after all these years." Mary was right. Roger admitted to himself Bunny had his heart, and about 13 months after their first lunch, the couple had bonded in marriage. No, Tracy had not been invited by mutual consent of Bunny and Roger Mary, and George only mentioned the neglect once, which meant they understood. A year later, Roger had his first child, and 2 years later, his second. After each birth, he thanked Bunny with expensive jewelry. Roger and Bunny were on the dance floor 2 hours after the party started. Her head was resting on Roger's shoulder, and she was nestled in his arms when Roger suddenly stopped moving and looked intently into his wife's eyes. He rummaged in his pocket and pulled out a small box that once held a diamond necklace. Roger went back to the jewelry store where he had bought the necklace years ago and exchanged it for a pair of diamond earrings. This time he was sure he would have the opportunity to give them to his wife. Eventually, Tracy found a man she could grow old with. She was 52 when she married Franklin Jameson. A widower with 2 grown children, she admitted to herself that while Franklin was nothing special at this point in her life, she probably wouldn't find anyone special, would be happy with a good man who loved her with all his heart. In her most intimate moments, Tracy admitted to herself that she had left her special man because of her own selfishness and stupidity. She fell in love with Joey's good looks, his youth, and her own lust, mistaking lust for love. Like a foolish schoolgirl, even though she had 11 good years with Roger, he didn't give her any slack once he found out she was cheating. Who was she kidding, she thought to herself. She was too caught up in the intense feeling she was getting from illicit sex to realize what she was really risking. Her parents loved Roger like family and tried to get Tracy to see the truth about what she was doing. It took her over 2 years to admit to herself that she was thinking with her head below the belt getting an STD was an amazing experience for a woman who thought she was in control. Roger marrying her younger cousin Bunny was a blow to Tracy, especially when she found out that it was her mother who brought them together. "She family, Mom. How could you do this to me? Set her up with my ex. He left me, for God's sake." Tracy whimpered. "You deserve to be dumped." Mary shouted at her daughter. "You cheated on him. I'd divorce your ass for that too." "Whose side are you on, Mom? You should be on mine. You're my mother. No, I can't put up with deceit. I raised you better than that," Mary said quietly. "Roger deserves a good woman even if she is your cousin. Why didn't Bun even invite me? She was one of my bridesmaids." Tracy said she respected Roger. Wishes. Mary said, "I think everyone agreed that his feelings meant a lot more than yours. Given that Roger, Bunny, and Tracy lived in the same town, their paths sometimes crossed. Roger was polite at best when he met Tracy. The cousins barely did more than stare angrily at each other. Eventually, Joey settled down and got married. His choice of women was no longer the same as before. His mugging when he was about 35 had left him with a permanent limp, and his once densely muscled body had degenerated into a loose one. His short hand seemed to lose its impact on women as his physical condition deteriorated. In his more reflective moments, Joey knew he no longer had the best choice of women. Once he passed 40, he settled for an average woman with an average body who seemed to really love him even when he strayed. Women no longer seemed as nice as they had a few years ago. The police questioned Roger and Tracy after Joey was robbed. The detectives were convinced that the robbers had taken too much pleasure in hurting Joey rather than robbing him. As she had suspected, no one had questioned Mary Houston about the attack on Joey. After all, why would the police suspect the sweet gray-haired grandmother? Mary guessed correctly. Although she blamed Tracy for her own mess, she knew that Joey was at least partly to blame for the destruction of Roger and Tracy's marriage, so he deserved part of the punishment. Although she hadn't told either Roger or Tracy of her intentions, she assumed they would both agree.